Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 76 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 2 of The Clash of Kings, that's Sansa 1.
Did that trip you up at all, having to say Clash of Kings instead of a Game of Thrones?
It's getting used to. I called it The Clash of Kings, which I'm having to confirm is
it's
not
Clash
what it's
of
called.
Kings,
It's A Clash of Kings. I actually got it wrong, yeah.
Well, as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, we'll provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what's happened, discuss our thoughts, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll help you with background material, particularly if you're not reading along. How are you, Mikkel? Got any funny stories?
I believe you've already had a preview of what happened to me this week.
I have had a little preview of it, and it made me chuckle. I was in a meeting with all these managers, and I got the message, and on camera I burst out laughing when I saw it.
I'm just that dedicated, man.
Yes.
So Monday morning, I was working away like I would every Monday morning, and I sent an email, and I sent several emails. In fact, one of them happened to have my manager copied on it. And then a few hours later, still working away, I get an instant message from my manager that says, "Hey, you know we have today off, right?" And I said, "Are you serious?" And his response was, "Are you serious about asking me if I'm serious?"
I can't believe you missed it.
I had no idea. And the ironic thing is Sunday night, Stacy said, "Are you off tomorrow?" And I was like, "No, we never get Martin Luther King Day off. It's you could take it as a floating holiday if you want, but it's not a set holiday." Apparently, all of a sudden it is, and I didn't know.
So this story was bandied at my meeting today, and everyone was laughing at you, although Your name was not mentioned. It was just a random person this had happened to. But my manager said at that meeting, he said that he happened to be in the meetings with the same person 3 times last week, and in each meeting that person said, "Hey, in case anyone doesn't know, we've got Monday off." And apparently in every meeting, like 3 people went, "Really? I didn't know that." So apparently, if you just had a meeting with her, you would have been saved. She was the one sort of going around.
She was like the Pied Piper of Martin Luther King Day being off.
Thank you for your dedication.
Yes, that's right. And the thing is Molly had a swim meet this weekend. It was Saturday morning, Sunday morning, Monday morning. And she had to be there like before the sun was up, like 6:15 in the morning. Oh. So, I was already up. So I went down, started working. I've been working for hours before my manager finally caught me. But man, did we laugh hard about that. Oh, well, hey, I'm just that dedicated, man. That's all I got to say about that. There's something else I wanted to tell you. I've been wanting to tell you this for like a month. So I know you like games.
I do like games.
I know you like games.
Mm-hmm.
Stacy got for us to entertain ourselves with over Thanksgiving, because it was a rather unusually small affair. She got this cold case game where you get this code file and you have to try and solve the murder in this code file.
It's fictional.
Yes, it's fiction, just totally made up. Right. But it comes with all kinds of supporting documentation that
right. So it feels like it's real, but it's a fictional thing. You have to crack the case.
Yes.
That sounds fun.
It is, and true crime is not my thing, but this was fun. I really enjoyed this. So I thought if you guys are interested, I could give it to you, and I made sure not to destroy anything so that it can be reused like it was.
Put a big red
time.
Arrow pointing to the. This is the big clue.
So, if you're interested...
So did you time yourself for anything? Was there a...
No. You know how it goes. Everybody was interested at first. Like, Uh, we got through. You get these like you gotta solve this one thing, and then you get an envelope and you open it, and it gives you more information. Like what your next thing you have to do is. By the time we were to the second envelope, it was just me, and by the time we got to the third envelope, it was just me.
I got visions of like the whole house asleep, and you're just there with an ashtray full of butts.
I gotta solve this, man. Yeah, it took. I stopped. I stopped and picked it up the next day and stuff. So,
did you crack it though?
I did indeed.
Good for you. Good for you.
So
I'd like to try it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. If we can ever run into each other in person, I will definitely give it to you.
All right. Well, let's get down to business. How do we leave Sansa? Last we saw of her, she was after her father's beheading. Being further abused by her husband-to-be, King Joffrey Baratheon. He forced her to witness both her father's and Septon Mordane's heads on spikes, and only the intervention of the Hound stopped her from hurling Joffrey to his death from the walls of the Red Keep. Why don't we give them the summary of this one? Okay.
So it's Jeffrey, yeah.
Jeffrey?
So it's Joffrey's 13th name day. Happy birthday. After preparing in her room... purple dress with long sleeves to hide the bruises, Sansa has a rather pleasant walk with her escort, Ser Arys Oakheart of the Kingsguard, to the tourney in Joff's honor. Arys shares his view on the red comet. Surely it signifies glory to Joff. He also shares some gossip that Queen Cersei is furious that her father Tywin has holed up in Harrenhal instead of coming to King's Landing as she commanded.
When they arrive at the tourney, Sansa notices how different it is from the last one she attended in her father's honour. It's a makeshift setup in the outer bailey of the Red Keep. The hastily erected gallery is sparsely filled, with only a few local houses represented. The rest are gold cloaks and Lannister guardsmen. Sansa finds Joffrey and his younger siblings Myrcella and Tommen in the seats of honour, guarded by the Hound.
Sansa is happy to learn that Joff appears to be playing the gallant role today. He compliments her on her appearance. Little Tommen excitedly announces that he's going to ride in the tourney, against a straw dummy, of course. The actual jousting is not much more exciting. The Redwyne twins participate, as do several members of the Kingsguard. The matches are uninspiring at best. Sansa notices Joff growing bored and begins to get uneasy.
Things get interesting fairly quickly when a drunken and pantsless Ser Dontos Hollard tries unsuccessfully to chase down his horse for his joust in front of all in attendance, eventually giving up and asking for more wine. Sansa sees a familiar look on Joff's face, similar to the one he had when sentencing her father to death. Joffrey wants Ser Dontos drowned in a cask of wine for his transgressions.
Sansa surprises herself by refuting Joff's command. A similarly surprised King Joffrey questions if she had just done what he thinks she had just done, and threatens a similar fate as Ser Dontos. Sansa, fearing for her life, pulls an excuse out of thin air. She tells the king that he must kill the drunken knight tomorrow, as it's bad luck to kill a man on your name day. She knows that he knows that she's lying, but the Hound's voice speaks up from behind them, confirming what Sansa has said.
Instead of killing him, Sansa suggests it's much more cruel and fitting to make the knight Joffrey's new fool. The king, always one for degradation and humiliation, bites on the idea, much to the relief of both Sansa and a quickly sobering Ser Dontos. By now Joffrey's had enough and cancels the remainder of the tourney. He makes one final concession, allowing Tommen to go face his straw opponent.
After being unhorsed by the straw man, Tommen gets back on his pony and rides all out for a group of battered men who have just arrived in the Red Keep. Sansa notices that Tyrion rides among the group. After sweet greetings to Tommen and Myrcella, and a less sweet reunion with the king, Tyrion offers his condolences to Sansa for her losses, which confuses Sansa, as it was King Joffrey who ordered those losses.
Tyrion and Sansa linger for a moment after Joffrey and the kids leave. He questions if her sadness stems from the loss of her father. She tells him that her father was a traitor, as are her brother and her mother. She is loyal to King Joffrey. Tyrion is again sympathetic to her plight. After he leaves, Sansa thinks he's more gentle than Joffrey, but that he's still a Lannister, and as such cannot be trusted. Probably smart.
Yep.
But perhaps a little bit unfair on Tyrion.
Yeah, I guess once bitten, twice shy when it comes to the Lannisters here.
Yeah. So, so tracking back, so there was a discussion about the comet between Ser Arys Oakheart, who reckons that the common people are calling it King Joffrey's comet.
She figures that's what they're telling Joffrey. Whether it's true or not, that's what they're telling him.
Whether Ser Arys believes it or not, as long as Joffrey believes it, everyone's going to be happy. Yeah.
His Ser Arys' reasoning is that the comet is crimson, and the Lannister colors are crimson. But then Sansa thinks to herself, but he's also a Baratheon, so shouldn't the gods have sent him a gold comet? Because their sigil is a black stag on a gold field. And it seems like all have forgotten that he is supposed to be Joffrey Baratheon, including his own Kingsguard seem to have forgotten this fact.
Yeah, including himself, it seems, at some point.
It does.
because I think, actually, one thing I think we skipped over a little bit was Tyrion offers Joffrey condolences for his loss. Right. And Joffrey doesn't remember that he lost his father.
Yes.
That slips his mind. He's too busy being king, you know?
Yep. That is, I think that's rather telling that he has completely forgotten that his father has recently died. But Arys, another point that he makes as to why this comet is signifying that Joffrey will have a great reign and defeat all of his enemies is that Sansa says, well, I'm hearing that it's being called, the dragon's breath or whatever. And Arys says, well, Joffrey is the dragon's heir. He sits Aegon's chair in the castle built by his son. It feels a little bit like reaching to me.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a stretch to call him Aegon's heir.
Yeah, I think pretty much anyone who claims the throne can say, see, the comet?
Right.
I am the true dragon.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. So Sansa compares Arys Oakheart to the other Kingsguard. They beat her without question. Arys is at least sort of very cordial to her.
Right.
When Joffrey had him beat her, Arys did object, but he still hit her in the end, but not as hard as Sir Meryn Trant, right? He's the one
Meryn
she's
Trant
most afraid
Boris
of.
Blunt.
Yeah.
So she mentions, she kind of goes through all of the Kingsguard aside from Jaime here. So I thought it might be a good opportunity to break down the Kingsguard members so everybody keeps them straight in their head. So who we're dealing with right now is Ser Arys Oakheart, and this is the first time we've officially met him. And Sansa does consider him courteous and cordial, and he seems a lot more like the Knights of Song that Sansa would think of, and he seems more honorable. He did question his king about beating this poor young girl.
Yeah.
He did still do it, but, and we also learned that he's a big fan of gossip. So,
well, yes, apparently, yes.
But of the Kingsguard that's left, he reminds me most of Barristan Selmy.
Right.
The thing I found weird, the thing I found a little bit weird is that when Barristan was removed from his role as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and it said that all of the Kingsguard members present laughed at their former brother. And that just doesn't seem like what we've seen so far from Arys, but people are complex. So
yeah, he may have seen everyone laughing and gone with the wind.
Right?
Like,
yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's real funny. So next up is Sir Meryn Trant. He's supposed to be cold. He's the one who beat her after Ned's death.
Yeah.
And later on, if you remember, he interacted with her and acted as if nothing had happened, as if they'd barely met before, when his knuckles were still bruised from hitting her.
Yes. As was her face.
So, yes. So he's the one who presumably killed Syrio Forel when he was sent to capture Arya.
Yeah. So then we've got Boris Blunt, and Sansa thinks that he is short-tempered. And we didn't see this, but she mentions it in this chapter that after Joffrey found out the news about Robb calling himself the king in the north, he flew into a fury and sent Ser Boris to beat Sansa. And we haven't seen a lot of him yet, but he was the one that escorted Sansa down to Queen Cersei and some of the small council after she had been stuck in that room with Jane Poole when the Lannisters attacked the Starks.
Right, and Cersei wasn't pleased with him for that, right? She thought it was stupid to have Jane Poole there.
Exactly, yes. Right. Now, both of these men, Ser Meryn and Ser Boris, they were present in Winterfell with the king. They were part of the group that escorted the king to Winterfell. And in Ned 7, Varys told Ned that both these two, Ser Meryn and Ser Boris, were Cersei's men when they were having the discussion about who really is looking out for King Robert. And one thing you notice, that having said that about Varys saying that they were Cersei's men, she has described both of them at the two opportunities when they were escorting her. Both were wearing the golden lion clasp around their white cloak, whereas Ser Arys is wearing a golden leaf. He's Ser Arys Oakheart, so the oak tree.
Yep. Next up is Mandon Moore. It's said that he has strange dead eyes. We've only seen him when he was involved in coercing Sansa into writing letters to her family, telling them to lay down their arms and everything would be fine.
Yeah. He was kind of standing guard while that was happening. And then finally we get Preston Greenfield, Sir Preston Greenfield, I guess. We don't really know much about him at all, but he accompanied Robert on the hunt where Robert was killed. Now, of course, Barristan Selmy was also there, but we don't really know a lot about Preston Greenfield yet.
Okay, so that's 5, and they're rounded out by Jaime Lannister and the Hound, right?
Yes.
They make up the 7, right? Yeah.
And speaking of the Hound, we get more puzzling info here that Sansa says, well, she doesn't say it, but she thinks that the Hound, Joffrey has never asked the Hound to hit her. But it appears he's asked just about every other member of the Kingsguard except for the Hound. Yeah. Which is curious.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit before. We talked about it last time, and I the more I think about it, the more I think Joffrey fears the Hound, who wouldn't.
Right.
But he particularly fears giving the Hound an order that the Hound wouldn't obey.
I completely agree. Yes.
And I think he senses that he wouldn't obey that one, so that's why he avoids it more than anything else.
I agree. I think he's afraid that the Hound might refuse. And I think even Joffrey, as deluded as he is, at some level knows that his power is only as strong as his men are loyal.
Right.
And if the Hound refuses to do something that Joffrey commands him to do, that it might start a snowball effect or might make him look weak. And I think he would rather just trust in the guys he knows are just going to do what he says.
Yeah. So so Arys Oakheart, being the gossip that he is, does mention Cersei's fury at her father Tywin's decision not to come to King's Landing, as she ordered. If you remember, she ordered him to come to King's Landing, which didn't sit well. And so that's it. I mean, first of all, if you give someone an order, you expect them to obey it. But it was her father, and she doesn't have much clout over. I mean, she's Queen Regent, but that's all.
Yeah. And I don't know that she fully has thought that plan through, having Tywin come to King's Landing, because if she thought about it, I think she would realize that going to Harrenhal makes more sense, because it ultimately accomplishes what she wants. From Harrenhal, Tywin can keep Robb and Roose Bolton from linking up at Ruby Ford, where the Inn at the Crossroads is, which is the most southern ford of the Green Fork.
Can I just contend that point? Harrenhal's quite a bit south of there, though, isn't it? I mean, he might be able to harry them, but I mean, he's actually given up the Ruby Ford by going as far south as Harrenhal.
Yeah, but it's a lot closer than King's Landing is, though.
A lot closer.
If his scouts had said both parties are moving toward that general direction, he might be able to do something to delay them or cause issues.
I mean, obviously, it's a lot more defensible than the Inn at the Crossroads is.
Right. Slightly.
But at the same time, it feels like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think he has to stay engaged in the north because he's losing there and he needs to stop there. He needs to hold them back,
Right. If he goes to King's Landing, then there's nothing preventing Roose Bolton's force from just coming down, crossing the Ruby Ford, heading to the River Run, or Robb leaving River Run. But if Robb wants to get the whole gang back together and go north up to the Twins to meet up with Roose Bolton, then that leaves River Run exposed if he wanted to attack River Run, which is easier said than done, as we've learned from Jaime. But
you mean if Robb came to the Ruby Ford to cross to basically go back home?
If he can't cross at the Ruby Ford and he decides, well, I'm going to go north then and cross back over at the Twins and get my whole force back together. Now, of course, Roose could cross at the Twins and bring his force down.
Yeah.
But either way, he's created a bit of a barrier between King's Landing. And
that I don't disagree with at all. And just to sort of come back to Cersei's anger about this, I would have thought that Cersei might want him to come to King's Landing, and there's reasons for that. But if you say, hey, if the guy in charge of the military says, no, I need to do this,
right,
then you wouldn't be angry with the slight. You'd be like, okay, I understand. It's not like he's not on her team.
If he said I'm going back to Casterly Rock, you sort it out. Then that would be a different story.
Right.
But I also don't know that the size of his army could fit at the Red Keep or anywhere in King's Landing. So Harrenhal is big enough to hold this army.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
So if he brought his army down with him, he'd have them camped out on the outside of the walls. That might leave them exposed to some sort of attack, possibly.
It's true.
And he's still I feel like he's still close enough from Harrenhal to get to King's Landing if there's word that Renly is marching north. They might get there about the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's not like King's Landing is undefended. They could, even if he gets there second, he could cause problems for Renly. It's not like Renly's going to march in and take it.
Exactly. At the moment, I think they could still do everything they want to do with their army at Harrenhal versus the Red Keep.
Yeah. And I think sending Tyrion, okay, he brought some troops with him. Certainly he's bolstered the troop, the military force of King's Landing by sending Tyrion and his men. But he's also sent a trusted advisor. Cersei may not trust him, but it is someone that she can place trust in.
Yes.
If she chooses to.
He sent the brains of the operation.
But of course, she doesn't see him as having brains. She just sees him as lecherous and oafish.
Yes, this could be problematic.
Right, because that is the aura he surrounded himself with all these years. And I think that's a sort of strange thing to the book, because for us having his POV, it's impossible for us to see him like that.
Right.
But everybody has that view of him. So you wonder if
they don't get his inner workings of...
right. So do you think he's changed as this book has gone on? Like, maybe his brush with the wall and with Cat has changed him, or was he always like this? Some level, but he just hid it from everybody by being. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think we're about to find out whether he's up to this task. Whether he's never been given a task this big. It's either because he's been too immature, or nobody believes in him. We're about to find out. But I'm sure it certainly would have humbled him, and all the chaos going on has given him an opportunity to prove himself.
Yeah, yeah. I also wonder about the relationship now between Tywin and Cersei. I mean, Cersei is not a forgiving person, it seems.
Right.
And so, having sent Tyrion, that she might see that as an additional insult on top of, not only did you not do what I said, but you also usurped my authority by sending this idiot.
Good point. It's a double slap.
Exactly, yeah. So back to this chapter. So the tournament is within the keep. It's in the outer bailey, which is different from the Hounds tournament. The Hounds tournament was outside King's Landing, where there was plenty of room. right?
Right, yeah. When there was no war raging in the realm, the Hand's tourney was out on the tourney grounds, which is outside the King's Gate, which is in the south corner of King's Landing, which during this whole situation is now open only to leaving. Remember, there was some that were open to leaving, some that were open to entering, and the tourney grounds are kind of on the bank of the Blackwater Rush, but not right now. Now it's being held inside the castle. Something interesting that was said is that when Tyrion came through, Sansa thought that there's been troubles in the city, and the gates of the Red Keep have been locked for days. And so she's surprised to see all these men coming through, because obviously the gates must have been opened. But that sentence about there's the troubles in the city have had the Red Keep's gates locked for days makes me wonder what's going on out there. Is there some new development causing trouble in the city? Maybe refugees flooding the city from the Riverlands?
Yeah, that makes a certain amount of sense. Could it be sort of insurrection caused by the beheading of Ned Stark?
Yeah,
the crowd witnessed
possibly.
That.
Yeah. Now, when they beheaded him, the crowd went crazy, but maybe that was, just the bloodlust of the crowd. Maybe.
Right.
Since then, it's caused a stir and a little bit of an uprising.
That seems like a stretch. I can't imagine the small folk caring that much.
Yeah.
But as Joffrey's reign continues, his personality is going to become more widely known.
Uh-huh.
And his popularity will decrease. The more people know him, the less they will like him.
That's definitely the case.
And so you can imagine the common folk beginning to remember, that Ned Stark was a straight shooter.
Yeah, right.
It seems, just a
lot. We've only seen a few of his court sessions, but in the few we've seen, he's totally unfairly thrown people in the dungeons and had people fight to the death. Maybe his reputation is escaping, and people are becoming unrestful out there.
Yeah.
And I also wondered if they're still clamping down on the gates looking for Arya, because they don't know that she's left. As far as they know, she's still in King's Landing somewhere.
And of course, that would discombobulate the people. They would be like, "This is not fair. We need to be able to come and go." So yes, that would definitely contribute to it. Yeah. So I think it's probably a combination of these things. Maybe without the unrest cause of Ned's execution. I think that's probably still a stretch, but it may happen. It may be a slow burn. But the good news is they don't have much room for this tournament, but they don't have much of a crowd anyway, so
they don't.
That's not a problem.
Yeah. It's pretty much the same crew from the Sansa 5 chapter in A Game of Thrones, which was the one I just mentioned, Joffrey's first court session. All the folks that were looking at their fingernails and staring at the floor instead of making eye contact with Sansa. Pretty much all the same folks. There's a very small handful of lords here. We've got Giles Rosby, who was mentioned in that Sansa 5 chapter. He was sickly Giles Rosby, and even in this chapter she mentions him coughing into a pink handkerchief or whatever she calls it. And then we've got Lady Tanda Stokeworth and her 2 daughters.
Can I interject? Is that Peter Baelish was interested in one of those?
Well, other way around. Lady Tanda was interested in Peter Baelish. For I believe for his youngest daughter, Lully's, is who she had pegged for Littlefinger.
Right.
And then we've got little Lady Ermesond, and she is a absolute baby. She's less than a year old, and she's there with her wet nurse. And rumor is, Sansa says there's talk that little baby Ermesond is soon to wed a cousin of Cersei's. So we've met 2 of Cersei's cousins. We've met Lancel. He's Kevin's son.
Robert's squire.
Yes, and the other squire of Robert's, Tarek, is also a cousin of Cersei's. So could be one of those 2.
Right. And then there's Jalabar Show.
Yes, my favorite name in the in the stories.
Sorry, I've taken it from you. So he's a summer islander. He's an exiled prince and nowhere to go. He was, if you remember, we talked about him as sort of courting Robert because as an exiled prince he wanted to reinvade the Summer Islands, and Robert was the kind of king who was looking for a fight. So
right,
that was the hope. I somehow don't think that Joffrey's going to have time to go on such missions.
Not at the moment.
But he may need somewhere to flee eventually.
Yes. But then the jousting is just a complete fiasco. When the jousting actually starts, it's a mess. We get, again, some of the folks that were mentioned in that Sansa 5 chapter. Balon Swan, he was in the hands tourney as well. He was the one that was a really good archer. He finished in the top 3. Right. He's from the Dornish Marches, where there are a lot of good archers from. He went on the hunt with Robert. So, and he was in the chapter. He was the one when Ser Dontos went to go hail Sansa. He caught Ser Dontos and whispered in his ear, and Ser Dontos ignored her like everybody else was doing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Red Wine twins, Horace and Hobber, or as the Stark girls called them, Horror and Slobber. Horror and Slobber, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. They also almost ran over Arya in the chapter where Ned was beheaded when she was on her way to the Great Sept of Baelor.
Yeah. And they're basically trapped in King's Landing, perhaps unwillingly, because they're red wines, and the red wines owe fealty to the Highgarden.
To the Tyrells.
The Tyrells. Right? The Tyrells are now in league with Renly, and so these guys don't want to be here.
Right, and they're actually, I mean, it's the Tyrells in control, not the Red Wines, but they work pretty close, those two. So these two twins are actually kind of valuable hostages in a way. I mean, the Red Wines have a huge fleet, and they're not going to attack the city, which happens to sit on a bay. Yeah. If they're, the sons of the Lord are in there.
Yeah, but I mean, they might attack it. It's not like they're going to be firing artillery in there, I mean, that they're not in danger from a siege per se.
Right, it's more they're in
but
danger
you're absolutely
from
right.
From reprisal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Then there's a few. They mentioned that Sir Meryn and Sir Boris actually get to joust. Ser Arys mentions that he is jousting, but he never actually gets to go joust. Yeah. So those three are in there.
Janos Slynt's son, Morris, jousts, which sounds crazy to me. I mean, so he's the son of a butcher.
Right.
His father was chief of the Gold Cloaks, which I can't imagine there's much jousting in the Gold Cloaks. He was just the son of him. And now he's jousting in a tournament? I mean, it sounds like putting me in armor and sticking me on a horse. It's crazy.
The description certainly sounded like he had no idea what he was doing.
Yeah, he almost gets killed, right? I mean, he practically gets killed. He gets dragged along by the horse.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, this was foreseeable. Don't send the poor child out there to do that.
Well, like the Hound keeps saying, this is a tournament field of gnats, which was a little bit, I feel like is a little bit insulting to his Kingsguard brothers, because 3 of them are in this tournament. Sansa asks him, are you planning on participating? And he's like, in this lot? No, this is a tournament of gnats. But, there's 3 Kingsguards in it, so. So Horace Redwine, Hobber Redwine has not a very good show. I believe he faces off against Meryn Trant, and it doesn't go very well for Hobber. But Horace Redwine, he wins his match. He beats what's referred to as an elderly knight with silver griffins and on a striped blue and white field. And I spent too much time trying to figure out who this knight is, and I could find no information. Even a Wiki of Ice and Fire just has a question mark next to him in their description of who participates in this tourney. So my best guess is maybe it's an offshoot of House Connington, because their sigil is 2 combatant griffins on red and white, where the griffins are interchange color, the red griffin on the white and the white griffin on the red.
Yeah.
But the Conningtons are from the Stormlands, and they're located southwest of Storm's End, and they got absolutely raked over the coals for supporting the Targaryens in Robert's Rebellion. So it's not likely that the Conningtons are in King's Landing supporting King Joffrey. He may have been trapped in there.
Like the Red Wines, yeah.
Yes, but I can't tell you who. If you were hoping that we'd be able to shed some light on who that knight is, I can't tell you.
And the last jouster was Lothar Brune, who's a free rider in service of Littlefinger. You won't remember, but he beat Jory Cassell in the Hound tournament.
Right. It was a draw. They finished as a draw, and the King Robert gave the match to Lothar Brune because he thought he rode better.
Yeah.
He was supposed to fight Ser Dontos.
Right, so he doesn't actually fight this one, yeah. So the King's under a crimson canopy because he's just a Lannister these days, not a Baratheon.
He's not even trying.
Yeah, wearing a breastplate with a roaring lion on it.
Not trying.
They've just given up. One thing I think is nice, when Sansa arrives, his two younger siblings, Myrcella and Tommen, who I have slightly mixed feelings about. They were kind of cruel to Arya, but they sometimes seem kind of nice kids. They are very excited to see her. She is sweet back to them. So it's kind of like that's a nice scene, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, the description says that Myrcella nods a shy greeting to Sansa. And I thought it might be in Cersei's best interest to try to create a bond, some sort of friendship between these two girls. Maybe keeping Sansa happier, maybe not as down in the dumps. I mean, that's a hard task for Myrcella to accomplish there, but at least give her someone to talk to, maybe some sort of friendship. But they don't seem to have any. Now, they're not... at this point, Sansa is now 12, and Myrcella is 8 or 9-ish. Somewhere between 8 and 9. So, you know, they're not exactly of the same age, but, you know, might be worth...
That's a really good idea. You should be the Queen Regent of the Seven Kingdoms. Because, that's absolutely right. I mean, that would make Sansa so much happier in her life to have someone who she both looks up to and looks down on at the same time to be a playmate, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you remember, she was always kind of like trying to show off whenever Myrcella was in the room, you know, because she was a princess of the realm, and so it was kind of...
Right.
But at the same time, she is younger, so she'll feel that when you're an older kid playing with a younger kid, that younger kid just wants to please you, and she'll get that from her. So for two reasons, and it will bind her to the Lannisters.
Yes.
She is not bonded to any Lannister here.
Exactly. Yes, that was exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Good thinking.
So, but Joff, he's not quite so kind to... He is slightly kind to Sansa, but less so to his siblings. Yeah. And he mentions that maybe he'll make the Hound fight whoever the champion of the jousting is to the death, and Sansa thinks that Joff is fond of making men fight to the death.
It seems almost guaranteed that a member of the Kingsguard is going to win this tournament. If this tournament ran to its end, a member of the Kingsguard would win it. If the Hound were then to kill that person, you'd be one member of the Kingsguard short.
That's a good point. I had thought about that. Clearly Joffrey hasn't either, or he doesn't care. One or the other.
He doesn't care, yeah. So Joff's touch now fills Sansa with revulsion, but she's doing a better job of hiding it from him. She sits very still. And you wanted to mention that this was a Sansa-Arya difference?
It is. It's just, I feel like we could have a running tally of the ways that Arya would be killed in Sansa's world and Sansa would have gotten killed in Arya's world. Because there's another instance where if Joffrey had touched Arya, she would have flown at him and managed to get herself killed.
Yeah. So Joffrey mentions that he's heard of Viserys' death, which is interesting because that's come a long way, that news. And
yeah, it has.
He even has details of it. He knows that he was crowned with molten gold. So he's very happy about that because it sounds repulsive and violent. So he's thrilled.
Right up his alley.
But that's also kudos to Varys for having such good intel on what happened.
Yeah, it made me wonder how they got that info, but the Western Market was in town, so maybe, some members from the Western Market went back to the Free Cities, and that news spread, and his little birds got wind of it over there.
I was thinking it might have to be Ser Jorah, but Ser Jorah had already had his contact with Varys' little birds before Viserys' death. But Viserys' death might have been news that spread quite widely within Vaes Dothrak and therefore been picked up by the same birds, without Jorah actually spying.
Right.
Yeah.
Then everything goes a little bit crazy. Ser Dontos Hollard shows up, and like we said in the summary, he chases his horse half naked, and it's the wrong half that's naked. And
I feel with Ser Dontos there isn't a good half to be naked.
Yes.
But yes, it's still the worst half.
The worst of the two evils.
That's why the horse is running. He's like, I don't want that on my back.
And his drunken antics offend greatly King Joffrey, and Sansa notices that Joffrey has the same look in his eyes that he had when he pronounced death to her father at the Great Sept of Baelor. So that's worrisome to her. And by the way, if you're curious about the difference between Scarlet and Crimson, because the description says that Ser Dontos' horse is a swirl of Scarlet and Crimson, and I thought, is there a difference between Scarlet and Crimson? I had no idea. Scarlet is a bright red with a tinge of orange, whereas Crimson is a strong red color inclining to purple. Now, I took that directly off of the description. So,
well, that's impressive.
So there you go. If you ever wanted to know the differences in those colors.
Yeah. So at this point, Sansa, protects Ser Dontos by making up the story about not doing things on your name day. And again, we have this odd behavior of the Hound backing her up. And he specifically says, he actually sort of expands on her idea by saying, yes, what you sow on your name day, you reap through the rest of the year, which is
right.
Quite deft of him to come up with that. And Sansa, I think, at one point wonders if maybe she does remember this, if she hadn't just made it up, and maybe because the Hound story was so plausible, she's like, oh, I was right. But clearly he's just protecting her. So
yep, once again, he's protecting her. And then Joffrey says, fine, I'll kill him on the morrow, you fool. And she's like, ding, light bulb goes off, and she's like, yes, that is exactly it. You're so smart. He is a better fool than he is a knight, and you should make him your fool. And Joffrey bites on that, and he's like, yes, from now on you'll be my fool. And Dontos profusely thanks Joffrey and Sansa, and I thought, he'd probably be better off pretending it was the worst thing ever, because if Joff gets the idea that Ser Dontos is happy about this, he runs the risk of Joff reconsidering the whole plan in the first place.
So then, after the patheticness of the jousting, the last joust that's allowed is Tommen's fight with the straw figure. Now, the straw figure is geared up with antlers on his helmet, a la Baratheon. Now, I do get that Renly Baratheon has become the public enemy number one for claiming the throne, but they are Baratheons. You're setting up an effigy of your own family to have your 8-year-old son fight.
Yep, and Tommen shouts Casterly Rock before charging at the straw dummy that is made up to be a Baratheon, which is theoretically his last name.
Yes, so not King's Landing or even Storm's End, but Casterly Rock.
Right. Yeah. Now, at least Tommen's shield has the stag and the lion on it together, whereas Joffrey is just completely given up on this.
Yeah.
He's just wearing the lion attire these days.
So the straw thing spins around, and so when Tommen hits it, it spins around and collapses him on the back of the head and knocks him off his horse. And so he actually has to get up and get back on his horse. So Sansa thinks, that he is showing some courage by getting back on. But he's saved from a second run by the arrival of Tyrion, right?
Yeah. And Sansa here wishes that it was Tommen that was the oldest and not Joffrey, because she thinks, I can marry Tommen. Yeah, then Tyrion arrives.
Yeah, and Tyrion's super sweet with the younger children, as he was at breakfast in Winterfell, if you remember.
Right, yeah. They seem to have a very loving relationship, those three.
Yeah. Which, again, is another reason why I think Cersei should open her mind a crack to her brother, because...
The two that aren't very troubled, we shall say, seem to have a very soft spot, very fondness for her brother Tyrion. So.
Right, yeah.
And we also notice that the saddle is back, Tyrion's special saddle. As the description goes, the strange high saddle that cradles him in front and back. And if you remember, during the battle on the Green Fork, he was riding around like a warrior out there, hitting people and riding circles around them, and swinging his sword at everyone. And we wondered, how is he doing this without his special saddle? And when you get the description of it, that it cradles him front and back, you'd think it might be awfully hard for him to be wielding his sword as he was in this special saddle. So Tyrion is sweet with the two younger children, and then he gets to Joffrey and he takes a knee and he says, my king or whatever. And Joffrey's response is simply, you. And he's like, well, it is me. A better, maybe a more appropriate response is in order for an elder and an uncle, but okay. And then Joffrey says, what, did you bring me anything for my name day? And he says, I brought my wits. And Joffrey says, I would have preferred to have Robb Stark's head on a plate. And he says, he's calling himself a king. And Tyrion says, all sorts of people are calling themselves kings these days. It's the second time in this chapter when Joff is not sure if someone's mocking him or not. Earlier, he says, I plan on challenging your brother, Robb, to a duel. He says this to Sansa, and Sansa says, I'd like to see that. And he looks at her like, are you mocking me? I can't tell. So, yeah, it's twice. He's being mocked and isn't sure about it.
Sansa apologizes for the behavior of her mother and her brother, but Tyrion's so sweet that she's lured by him, but she warns herself not to be befriended, that he's still a Lannister.
Yeah, and after she apologizes for her mother taking him hostage, he says, a lot of people are sorry about that, and more may be sorry, a deal sorrier when he's done. And that's kind of ominous. And now that he's Hand of the King, you have to wonder if he might take further revenge on Lysa. Certainly sounds like he's got plans on making people even sorrier about the whole hostage situation.
Yeah. Although he might have been extending who might be sorry. If you think about it, I mean, lots of people could live or not live to be sorry about the fact that he was taken captive, including...
Because the whole war started.
Right, including Joffrey himself,
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
his throne is vulnerable because of it. And again, we had another little friction between the Hound and Tyrion, which we had in Winterfell as well. At one point, Tyrion says, I was speaking to the king, not his cur, and the Hound says, guard your tongue, little man. But... talking about what we were talking about before, I wonder if Tyrion should actually sort of befriend the Hound a little bit more, because it does feel like the Hound is the one person in Joffrey's circle who has some control over him.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to want to exert it for any real force for good, but he has it.
He has it if he chose to use it.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point. And then right here at the end of the chapter is when Tyrion also, after he tells Sansa, I'm sorry for your losses, he says to Joff, I'm also sorry for your loss. And Joff says, what loss? And he's like, the king before you, a big guy with beard, is your father. And he was like, oh yeah, that was really sad. And he says, he was killed by a boar. And Tyrion says, is that what they say? And it's the second time where he seems to have an idea that something is not legit. Because at that breakfast in Winterfell, we kind of got the inkling that he knew there was that Jaime and Cersei were somehow tied into Bran's fall. And here he seems to suspect that there was more foul play involved than just a boar.
But the thing about that is, here I see the reason he's suspicious here is because he sees a clear motive for the Lannisters. Sure. And I think whenever Tyrion thinks if something has happened and a Lannister has a motive for it, then there's reason to assume that Lannister did it. But what I don't know, because they act on their impulses, if they've got a motive to do something, they're going to go ahead and do it. But it was less clear that there was a motive for Bran's fall. We know there was, but it was not clear that there would be at the time. So I think he was much more on a fishing expedition there. I think here he's simply suspicious of his family.
Assumes, right. And it also, Joff doesn't know that his father is Jaime Lannister and not Robert Baratheon. So his lack of mourning his father's death is absolutely genuine. He truly doesn't care. And at this point has forgotten that his father has just died.
It's not that he's not mourning because he knows that's not his father. He genuinely believes his father has been killed. He just doesn't care. He is just disinterested. Because all he sees... I think he's raised by his mother. His father was a distant drunk who never interacted with him. He was raised by his mother. His mother sort of dripped poison about his father into his ear, or his supposed father. And so when the father died, all the Joffrey saw was, hey, I'm king now. That's great.
Yeah, you got a good point. I had that same thought about, his perspective is slanted by only interacting with Cersei, and she clearly had a strong dislike for Robert, with good cause. I'm not saying there's not good cause there, but
which also goes to his sloughing off the Baratheon trappings. It's easy for him to do that. I was raised by my mother. She was always good to me. She told me I was a great kid, all this kind of thing. I feel more the Lannister side of my family than I do the Baratheon side. And now look what's happened. My own uncle's gone off and claimed the throne,
That's a good point. Yeah.
So background,
I wanted to talk a little bit about little Lady Ermesand. She is actually Ermesand Hayford, and House Hayford is a crownland's house, as all those houses, the lords of the houses that were there at this tournament are all Crownland houses. Their seat is also called Hayford, and Hayford is located very close to King's Landing. It's less than a day's ride from the city, straight down the King's Road, and it's sworn directly to the Iron Throne. Their blazon is, it's kind of hard to describe. A wiki of Ice and Fire calls it a green Freddy over gold and a green pale wavy. But to me, it looks like green lattice pie crust with a thick green beanstalk down the center on a gold background.
Okay.
If you can picture that.
I can picture that.
Lattice with a thick green center, gold background.
You painted a picture for me with your words. Thank you.
All right. But during the Targaryen dynasty, several Hayford lords had notable distinctions. A Lord Hayford suggested to Maegor that he abdicate the Iron Throne when the realm began to favor Maegor's nephew Jaehaerys. Apparently, that Lord Hayford hadn't heard of the cruel moniker because Maegor had him beheaded and his head put on a lance for that comment. So,
okay, that goes into the cruel column, not the misunderstood column.
Another famous Lord Hayford was Hand of the King to Daeron II Targaryen, who was most famous for bringing Dorne peacefully into the realm. Unfortunately, his reign as Hand of the King didn't last long, because in 196 AC, he was bestowed the honor just before the Battle of the Redgrass Fields during the First Blackfire Rebellion.
I fear for him.
And he did not survive the battle. He was slain by
minutes.
Gorman Gormy Peak. House Hogg of Sow's Horn owes fealty to the Hayfords. I had hoped there'd be really interesting background info about how it came to be that a baby, less than a year old, is the head of a noble house. However, I could find no mentions of her parents anywhere. We know that Ermesand was born in 298, so because she's less than a year old. So her parents, especially her mother, died very recently. But shall we delve into a little completely unfounded conspiracy theory?
Please.
Okay. Given how close Hayford is to King's Landing, and her parents' death seeming to have come very close to one another, could it be possible that their deaths were at the hands of Lannister? You had just said a few minutes ago that, that
if the Lannisters have a motive, they probably did it.
Exactly.
So did they have a motive?
It's absolute speculation. There is no real evidence. But the loss of the Hayfords is the Lannisters' gain, as the Lannisters plan to assume the Hayford lands by marrying a Lannister to this baby. And the Hayfords do appear to be fairly wealthy. So we do know that the Lannisters have been on a power grab recently, and they're pretty good at plotting and scheming. So I'm just saying it's possible.
Well, you're saying it's possible. Tyrion thinks it's likely, let me tell you.
Yes.
So comparison with the TV show, we don't see the interaction between Sansa and Arys Oakheart. It's just the scene just starts at the tournament. It's nothing like the Ned's tournament. It's just a few short battle scenes within the Red Keep. There's no horses, no jousting. All of the fighting and Tyrion's entrance is on foot. You thankfully don't get to see Ser Dontos' manhood flopping about. He's played by Tony Way, who's really great in everything he does. Tommen does not fight. He's in the scene, but he doesn't fight. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it cleaves pretty closely. Including, just to say, including Tyrion being nice to Sansa, and Sansa looking confused about it, like trying to figure out what his motivation was.
Why is a Lannister being nice to me?
Right. Pedantry. The fact that the TV show confined the scene to the Red Keep does raise a point. If it's not really safe for the royals to go out, why have the tourney? It feels like that within the keep it might be hard to find a suitable place for jousting. Now, I recognise there's an inner bailey and an outer bailey, but where is the Red Keep locked? Is it locked on the outer bailey or the inner bailey? I guess it must be locked on the outer.
Must be.
Way.
Based on this, it must be, yeah.
But it feels like, again, maybe we need Dr. Milky to help us with medieval architecture, but it feels like there wouldn't really be enough room to have... I mean, you need quite a long straight run for a joust.
Right.
And to have grandstands alongside it, you need quite a big plot of land.
Right.
And it feels like that wouldn't really exist inside King's Landing.
I'm with you. I'm
Although
I've
been to a castle in the Czech Republic where they had a moat, which was just... The moat was... just grass and trees and whatever, because the moat, which doesn't sound like it's much of a barrier. I mean, you could climb down into it and climb back out. It wasn't,
right.
The nature of a moat. But the moat was populated by bears. Bears, actual living bears lived in it.
Well, that adds a twist.
It does, yeah. I mean, you could get across it, but you could easily not get across it too.
You better have a lot of stakes. Or picnic baskets, depending on if it's Yogi Bear that's in there.
News and notes, what do you got for me?
Well, I just wanted to give a quick hello to Silva Kaspars, who is a listener that we frequently interact with. He mentioned to me this week that his grandmother listens to us.
Oh, hey.
And so her name is Silva. And so I just wanted to say a quick hello to her and thank her for tuning in. I hope she enjoys our show.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I don't know. He told me, I know you're not supposed to reveal a lady's age, but he told me she happens to be the same age as George R.R. Martin. So,
well, I don't know how old George Martin is off the top of my head, so I'm going to pretend that she's a 32-year-old.
That's right. I think that's how old he is. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So anyway, I just wanted to say hello to our listener Silva.
Yeah. We had a special episode recently, which was our interview with Dr. Tammy Milky. Just to let you know, it set a new record for our first week downloads. So it obviously caught people's attention, and we really enjoyed doing it. So we'll definitely do more special episodes like that again. So yeah, and again, thanks to Dr. Milky. We had a great time doing that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's wrap this up. We've gone on too long.
We have.
So hooray for Tyrion, boo for Joffrey as usual, and hooray for Myrcella and Tommen, who were sweet to Sansa. And I hope Cersei listens to your plea for friendship.
Right.
I think that's a good idea. And kind of hooray for the Hound again. I do find myself forgetting that he murdered the butcher's boy.
Right. Yes. He's a complex character.
Yeah.
That Hound. But Sansa's the savior, at least as far as Ser Dontos Hollard is concerned. And she has certainly made a friend in the Red Keep in Ser Dontos, whether he's a fool or not.
Yes.
She did save him from drowning in a cask of wine, so
there's
that.
I mean, he's going to be around if he's going to be the fool of the king. But if he's always drunk, he might not be much of a useful friend. Really.
Yes. Better than nothing, though. I mean,
True.
it works for Shireen in Patchface. She's
true.
stuck with one friend on Dragonstone. So
that poor child. Every time I think of her with Patchface, I'm like, oh, that poor child.
Only friend.
Only friend,
Insane
and all he does is give creepy poetry about the others.
But Tyrion's in town. Tyrion's come to rule. But the question is, will Joff and or Cersei allow him to do? You give him the free rein to do what he sees fit to do.
Yeah, I think there'll be an interesting power struggle coming because Cersei won't be happy. She won't want to be bounced off the council, the small council.
Yep.
I don't think she's bounced off the small council. As Queen Regent, she's allowed to be on it, but she will have her authority. I don't know who has priority. Does a regent have priority over the Hand of the King? I would imagine the regent would, but I would imagine it would be a lot closer than Hand of the King versus the King.
Right. Yes. I concur. And we just keep getting more evidence that Joff is just a dangerous loose cannon. He's heading toward Mad King 2.0 here.
Yeah.
At least the Mad King waited until he was older before.
Yeah, I mean, he actually had a reign where he wasn't the Mad King for a while.
Right. Yeah. If Joff starts growing his fingernails out, we're in trouble. That was one of the Mad King had really long fingernails.
There's the first sign. All right, as ever, you can reach us at ghosts.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at ghostsharrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
And hey, if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate, you should see Simon's thumbs up he's doing here.
I am very happy with this thought.
A really nice review. We'd very much appreciate that. It would help us get the word out. We'd be forever in your debt.
We would. All right, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.